What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel, and on today's podcast, I'm interviewing Jonathan Castner from Touchline Appraisals. It's a soccer memorabilia appraisal company. Jonathan, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here. If you're joining us live on YouTube, hello, welcome. Please feel free to interact with us as we go along here. We'd love to hear from you. Chime in with any questions or anything like that, and I will relay them to Jonathan. If you're watching in the future, hey, still feel free to interact with us, and I'll get you an answer to your questions or just say hello. We'd appreciate that. With that, I think we're ready to jump into the interview. Jonathan, any last questions or anything?
I don't have any questions right now, no.
All right, cool. All right, so let's jump into the podcast. So again, I'm going to do another quick intro. I'd like to welcome on Jonathan Castner, who is the owner of Touchline Appraisals, a soccer memorabilia appraisal company. Jonathan, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us here. So I always like to start with having our guests kind of introduce them.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Having our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about where they grew up and playing soccer. So can you tell us kind of where you're from and your experiences playing soccer growing up?
So I grew up in northern New Jersey. I didn't grow up in Kearney or Harrison or any of the other soccer hotbeds. I grew up in Sussex County, which is in the northwest corner, and we grew up on a farm. So I grew up primarily playing soccer and baseball. Baseball was my first love. And I love basketball too, but I discovered I wasn't going to play in the majors or the NBA, and soccer came a little easier for me. I played in a travel team when I was a kid, but I wasn't really serious about it until I was in high school, and that's about 1993, 94. I started televising games. I think with Dutch League games early in the mornings, like on ESPN. I started watching. I think my first game I saw was I think it was Sparta and Ajax or someone like that, and it was just I was hooked. And then they started televising Premier League games, and they had an hour-long highlight show. I came on in the afternoons, and I would rush home to watch that. I loved it. I used to tape it on the VHS, and then I played with a select team that went over to Europe. This is before it became like the big thing, and everyone, had these tours, soccer tours in '94, the spring of '94. And we played against some local semi-professional teams and other youth academies. We did really well, and it was incredible. It was just to see how serious they were about the game. And this was in Austria, Italy, Germany. I remember one morning we went out to the field for a training session. I was looking. There was a grounds crew guy that was out there who was actually measuring the grass with a tape measure to make sure it was the right length. And I thought, my goodness, these guys are really serious. And of course, that summer '94, went to the World Cup, had a few games, saw Italy and Norway, and a few other games there at Giant Stadium, and that was fantastic. And then from there, that's all I thought about every day was soccer, just playing it. Playing with different teams. Played in college. I played junior college at Sussex for a couple of years, and I played at Rutgers Newark, and that was great. But then I got burnt out with it. It was soccer all the time, nonstop, and I kind of wanted to take a break, and so I did. And I went into journalism. I worked for a newspaper, worked in publishing, magazine publishing. Got back into the game a little bit when I moved to New York City. Played with Cosmopolitan League a little bit. And then got into coaching a little bit, and then I started to launch I launched a soccer magazine. So that was sort of an eye-opening learning experience. Soccer magazine for grassroots soccer in the New York metropolitan area, and then it just kind of grew from there. Full color printed magazine we sent out to anyone who was involved in the game, basically in the Northeast, primarily New York City. And New Jersey and Connecticut. It kind of grew from there, but it didn't make any money. So I lost a lot of money doing it, and so I folded it, and I went back into coaching a little bit. I coached youth level with soccer shots. I coached with the Red Bulls, their youth academy, and also coached in college a little bit with their Sinus, local college here in Pennsylvania. And now I decided, I've always been around appraisals, always been around. My father had a auction business growing up, and my father's an appraiser. I thought, well, what about having an appraisal business just for soccer memorabilia? And I know it's very niche. but let's see how it goes. Let's see what happens and kind of take it from there. And so we're here now.
All right, I love it, and you touched on basically everything I want to hit on with these questions. So let's go back to the Green Pitch, the regional soccer magazine from 2003. What was the inspiration to start that? I know you talked about being in New York City playing, but what was there a spark where just something clicked and you said, "All right, we have to launch this grassroots magazine," or was it more of an evolution? What was the inspiration for that magazine?
I always had the idea to do something like this. I remember I used to subscribe to Soccer America when I was a kid. I used to get that every week. I don't know if you subscribed at all, but and I liked it. I liked the fact that it was before the internet and we could find out what was going on, who the coaches were. I remember Bob Gansler, I think, was the coach of the U.S. team, and there's an interview about him getting let go and Bora Milutinovic coming in. And so that's how I followed. And I was like, I'd love to write for these guys, or I'd love to do something like this, but more current, more up to date. So that was always there. Getting into journalism, that was part of it as well. But I think it was the 2002 World Cup. 98, me and my buddies in college, we were all sitting around watching the U.S. just bow out miserably in 98. And it was so disheartening. And that was what kind of killed it for me too, because I always felt if my team was kind of good or competitive, I kind of enjoyed that. There was a sense of pride a little bit. And the fact that the U.S. got knocked out in those 3 games, I remember that I think they had to win against Iran in 98. And I think they lost 2-1. I think McBride scored, but there was just some great goals Iran scored. And then the last game against Yugoslavia, I think that was just over. But it killed me. So in 2002, when I wasn't expecting anything, I got up in the morning. I think I got up late for the Portugal game, and I was expecting them to be down like 3-0, and they were up 3-0. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And so I just was like, okay. And it started getting the ball rolling a little bit. I was in New York. I started playing in New York. And that's sort of the spark. I think 2002 is what really did it.
I love it. And so can you take me through the time? Like, I have no idea how to launch a magazine. So 2002, you kind of have the inspiration. It gets launched in 2003. What happens from the time, hey, I want to start this, to, hey, this is actually being shipped out?
So I really just wanted to get something out to start, to kind of test the water a little bit. So I just put a newsletter out for all the local Cosmopolitan League teams. And there was already a magazine that was out there that was kind of a pub fanzine. It was called First Touch. I think they might be still around, but they were distributed in all the Irish bars, and it was a pretty popular little pamphlet. So I wanted to do something a little bit better. So the first one I put out was a simple newsletter, but I had color printing, color photos, everything, nice glossy finish, and it was only like 8 pages. And I only printed out maybe 1,000 copies. And I used to go to games to distribute them. I used to go to, bring the box on the train. It's like, who is this guy? Is he homeless? Is he selling? What is he selling exactly? So I used to do that, and I went to newsstands, and I started getting a lot of emails from people saying, this is really cool. You should do this, but do it on a bigger scale and make it better. So I started sinking money into it and spending more time, and I started expanding the focus of the magazine to include more lifestyle kind of stories, from the Homeless World Cup to, we did a story about, there was a big soccer fan in Egypt, and he drove a cab. He's been to like every World Cup since 1974, and he's got a little fez cap on, and he's playing a lute, and he's at the game. So we did a story about him and what he was going through just to get tickets and to bring his family from Egypt. So all these great stories in New York City of soccer related, and we wanted to capture that. But as something, if you're passionate about something, sometimes you lose sight of maybe why you should do it or shouldn't do it. If it's not making money, maybe you need to scale it back a little bit. And I think I did the opposite. I think I figured, okay, I haven't done enough. Maybe I need to make it bigger. And I think that was probably the lesson I've learned, is that you need to take steps and see if these things are working before you proceed. So yeah, overall, it was a great experience. And I learned a lot by doing it in terms of running a soccer related business from the ground up. I think that was great.
And that's Awesome to hear. I mean, I can speak from personal experience, maybe sinking money into soccer related projects that, maybe you shouldn't. So I'm completely, I know exactly kind of maybe what you went through in that. So then after the magazine, I don't know if there was anything in between, but I want to talk about you then started working for the National Appraisal Consultants in 2011. I assume you kind of specialized in sports and specifically soccer memorabilia. What was the change? I know you talked about, the magazine was a little bit of a money sink, and your father had experience in the appraisal business. Why did you then decide to switch from kind of journalism and all that into the sports memorabilia appraisal world?
Sure. I went. I had actually gone to grad school for publishing because I had a hard time finding a publishing job in New York, a magazine publishing job. So I was looking for a job, and uh, there really weren't a whole heck of a lot of opportunities in terms of what I wanted at that point. There were some book publishing opportunities, but I didn't really want to work in book publishing. So was working with my father sporadically here and there on appraisals, and I was helping him out. And I realized that I had a lot of interest in not only history, but memorabilia, whether it's sports related or antiques and collectibles. And I had a pretty good memory, and I really just started getting into it that way. I think this was a good opportunity to learn from somebody who's experienced, and then maybe I can take it in a couple different directions after I do it for a few years. I took all the coursework, the ISA, it's International Society of Appraisers, is a pretty big organization. I took their core course. I took USPAP, which is it's a standards, appraisal standards course that you should take. So I took all those things. I had the experience, and I really enjoyed doing the work. And I found it was, for the first time, I really, really felt I really enjoyed the work. There wasn't really any grunt work. I enjoyed all of it, the research and the inspecting an item and things like that. So I really felt sort of drawn to it. And from there, we would get sports memorabilia occasionally. I would handle the sports memorabilia jobs, and I loved the sports memorabilia even more. So if it's soccer related, I thought, wow, what about something soccer related? Most of these sports appraisers in this country, they have no soccer background. There's very few sports memorabilia appraisers to begin with, and those that are there, they deal with baseball and basketball. They can tell you how many RBIs Roberto Clemente had in 1963 or 61 or whatever. I can't do that, but I can tell you, when Danny Blind made his debut with Ajax in 1987 or whenever it was. I mean, things like that. I love soccer related stats and things. So that's sort of where I went. I don't think it was definitely a specific moment where I said, this is what I want to do. It was sort of gradual.
That's fascinating. And I'm fascinated by this whole sports memorabilia valuation topic. I know nothing about it. So can you break it down for a layman like myself? Like, what goes into valuing a piece of sports memorabilia?
So so I'm an appraiser. So I look at the value of an item, and a client, an owner of some personal property. I'm a personal property appraiser, not a real estate appraiser. So I'll make that, it should be obvious, but so I value personal property, and there are several reasons why the owner of a personal property may need an appraisal. They need an appraisal for insurance coverage to find out how much it's worth. They just want to know what it's going to sell for on eBay or on the secondary market or on an auction. So there's different values. One item, if you have an autograph, there's a ball behind you. If it's autographed, that ball we might have a value for that at retail level, which will be much higher. A value at more the auction level or eBay, where it's going to be much cheaper, which might be even more wholesale value. So you have different values, and the process basically it's pretty simple. You just inspect the item, and then once we know what the appraisal is for, the appraiser will know where to look for comparable sales of that particular items that are similar to that item. So if you want to sell something at auction, I will look for similar items or like items, how they've sold at auction maybe for the last 5 years. And then I will come up with a value, and that value will be known as a market value, or I'll offer the client a range of values. So let's say $400 to $600 for a Diego Maradona signed Napoli shirt, a match-worn shirt. Well, match-worn Napoli shirt would bring more than that probably, but but that's maybe what you'd sell for it at auction. Now, if I was doing insurance and they wanted insurance value, we would look at retail or replacement cost. So if that item was lost, if it was damaged or something happened, what's it going to cost to replace that item? Find a replacement for it. And we're going to be looking at the retail level. We're going to be looking at shops. So that same item that might have sold for $400 to $600 at auction is now probably more likely going to sell for $1,000 at a retail shop, because it's sitting up somewhere. They got to pay for their rent. It's sitting there. They got to get their own insurance or whatever goes into it. So there's different values. And this is why it's important to have an appraiser. If you need a value for a specific reason, talk to an appraiser and they can help you out. And that's sort of generally what goes into it. The inspection, looking at the item, determining if it's a real shirt. Like, for instance, if someone owns a soccer jersey and they say, listen, this is match worn. George Weah wore it for PSG against Arsenal, and I know, and so I would look at the shirt. But the most important thing with a match worn item is some kind of certificate of authenticity, either a letter, a photo of Weah with the shirt, some proof that this is indeed a match worn item, because a match worn item could conceivably be 3, 4, 5 times the amount of just an official shirt. So these are all these different levels to worry about if you have if you're an owner of soccer memorabilia, and why it would be wise to speak to an appraiser.
That's super interesting. Now, on the last point, match worn, nowadays we see guys like literally take off their kit and just throw it into the crowd. How does that? How do you get proof there? Would you just like take a picture of yourself with it? Like, is that enough for you, or do you need something more, I don't know, more physical or official from either the club or someone else?
Could be anything. It could be if you get that shirt, a player throws it into the crowd, and he's walking away or something. Get a shot quickly, because that could be your only authentication that you have, is that photo of you at the game, maybe with him in the background, or ask him to come over and take a selfie with the player. As long as it's, if it's after the game, they have time, and sometimes they do that. Sometimes you can get after the game, if you contact the club and say, listen, I have that shirt. Is there a possibility I could get something from the club to say that this shirt is match worn? They might be able to help you out. They might want the shirt back too. I mean, that usually doesn't happen, but sometimes it might. And they call those shirts, they're match official shirts. And if the player does not wear the shirt, it becomes match unofficial. So that shirt is there, but that's sort of a way just to note that, okay, this player, it's a difference between a match official shirt. If you go and buy a US shirt for $120 and it's very close to what they wear, it's not quite the same as what they wear in the field. The shirt is a little bit, the stitching is different. It's a little lighter. It's more breathable. It's not necessarily as durable. You'd think the shirt they would wear would be more durable, but it's actually the opposite. The shirt they're wearing in the field is just meant to wear for a game, or if that, and then they get rid of it and they sell it at charity auctions. They give them away. So they go through a lot of shirts. But again, if you own a match worn item and sell it, or you want to buy one, make sure that there's a COA there, something to show.
Gotcha. Okay. So you broke up a little bit there, but I think we got the most of it. It was basically that there's a difference between match worn and match unofficial, and, match official and match unofficial. And the, items that they wear in matches are actually less durable, which is sort of counterintuitive. So yeah, all that's really fascinating to hear. And I guess it makes sense when you put it the way that you did. So really, really awesome kind of insight there. Switching roles just a little bit. You also coached with Ursinus and New York Red Bulls academies. So can you tell us a little bit about your roles with each of those programs?
Okay, so with the New York Red Bulls, it was primarily, it was through their academy system, but it was more of along the lines of their training programs. So what would happen is you would go out and you would coach, you would train with them, work with them, and then you'd go and find a local youth club that you would train with. You would coach, basically. You would coach 6 teams. I coached 6 teams. Everybody coached a different number, but I coached 6 teams in Westchester County up in New York. So you would all of the training methods, all of the ideas, all the sessions, you would be able to absorb what they were teaching and come up with your own training sessions. And it was a good experience. Got to see firsthand, because it was really the first time I had ever coached youth at the youth level, really, with youth clubs. I've never coached, like, a Saturday or Sunday and all these travel teams. So it was my first take on it, to see how passionate the parents were. Some of them were a little, overly, overly into it, but
Yeah.
it was good to see, and you got to see firsthand the talent that was there. And how delicate the talent is, and how you have to be freedom to let them enjoy the game, let them really love it, because there's too much, at least in my opinion, everyone feels a little differently, but in my mind, there's too much regimented competition at a very young age with youth soccer. It's become such a big cash cow in this country that there's so much pressure to win all these tournaments and to show that you've won and to get as many people through the door as possible. So the Red Bulls they kind of were the opposite of that. They were sort of like, let's just make sure that the kids are, they love the game and they're fans. Obviously, there's the component that they want to bring people into this, to go to games, and they want to make these people fans. But at the same time, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you want a kid who's 7, 8, 9 years old to be a soccer fan. You want a kid to go to his or her local game, whether it's MLS or the women's league. You want them to get involved and have that passion. You want them to try things they see in a game. You don't want a coach to chastise a player and say, why did you try to dribble through those players? You should have, well, there's a time and a place, and they have to learn on their own. The game is the best teacher, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's true. So that was a good experience. And then coaching at Ursinus was a good experience too. I had played in college 20 some odd years earlier, and I feel like it's the same thing in college. I think college is not professional. These guys should have fun. If you're at a high level, if you're playing Division I, and there's money involved in it and scholarships, then it's a different animal. But if it's not a scholarship situation like a Division III school, I think you should, especially if you're trying to rebuild a team, have a little fun with it, have the kids have fun with it. They've got too much going on to lose sleep over, a game. At least that's how I feel. It's everybody's different.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective, and I love that kind of strategy. We've had a couple of coaches or players that are kind of around that age, and I think that, me being someone who's older now and reading about, youth development in this country, everybody wants to talk about how, the college needs to get more professional or whatnot. And a lot of these people are saying, no, that's not necessarily the case. The purpose of playing college soccer isn't always to be, a professional. It's very different than American, football or basketball in that sense. And so it's always good to keep all of that in perspective. So, it's interesting hearing that. Last question on the coaching front. I know Red Bull kind of has an ethos throughout their organization of how they play. How deep down does that go? Like, did you have freedom with your training plans, or how much of it do they say, hey, we want to play this way? Does it get all the way down to the youth levels that you were training, or was it more, you had more freedom?
That's a good question. I think there's a general philosophy about technical ability first, developing individual technical ability first, that kind of runs through it. And they want to see players develop with the ball, get as much ball time as possible. And, that's sort of a general way of looking at it. I know a lot of academies say they do that, but I think with the Red Bulls, I think it's more about developing individually, technically sound players, and working with the clubs to help that happen. So, you don't have a problem if somebody's trying to dribble through 3 players. If they lose the ball and something happens and the team scores at the other end, they know, okay, that wasn't a wise idea. I don't need to stop them to tell them why. I'd rather I stop them maybe after, or I tell them, listen, you did right there. And everyone's going to get on that kid anyway. So you know, I think we're evolving. I think when it comes to coaching in this country, we have to sort of find our own way and learn our own way. We don't really have our own style. Our national team doesn't really have a style. It never really has had much of a style because we absorb all these different cultures, and you know, our history is sort of brief. So I think that finds its way to being focused on the technical side of it, making sure the players are technically proficient. I think is what they're about.
Yeah, and that's awesome to hear, and I'm in agreement with you on all of those fronts. Now let's switch back over to the appraisal stuff. And so in August 2018, you founded and launched Touchline Appraisals, which is soccer specific sports memorabilia. Similar to my question about the Green Pitch magazine, was there an inspiration for you to take the leap in August 2018? You know, why did you decide to launch, you know, at that time?
I just felt like I think that the memorabilia market is poised for in this country is poised for some rapid growth. I think in the next few years. I think you ask a question, who's collecting soccer memorabilia, and there are a lot of young people, but it's mostly people who are a little bit older, especially in this country. In England and in Europe, it's young kids. Everyone's collecting it, especially shirts. Shirt collecting is a huge business in England. It's incredible. Over here, we're a little bit behind, but it's more of the older players who've already coached, or they've already played in college. Maybe they have a child. Maybe they just got married. You know, they have a man cave, or they just bought a house and they want to, in the basement, they have a man cave and they want to put, you know, some soccer stuff down there, or they want to put a bar down there and they want to put up some jerseys and this and that. And so they want to know, okay, what is, if I want to go out and buy something, what's it going to cost? What's it going to, you know, what does it take to get it autographed? I really love, you know, players from the 80s, like a Marco van Basten shirt. What's it going to take to get an autographed Marco van Basten shirt? How much is that going to cost me? I want to get a match worn shirt. I'm serious. I got some money to spend. I got a few $1,000s. Can I get a mark? And so in launching this, I talked to some people that I know that are like, yeah, what, you should focus on this or you should focus on that. But I think that it's an organic thing, and I think it's going to take some time, but I just felt like the time was right. And you know, the United States is, hopefully we qualify for the next World Cup. Hopefully we qualify. Well, we're going to be in the 2026 World Cup, but I don't think it depends on that anymore. I think we've gotten to the point now where if the U.S. national team, the men's national team, I should specify, I shouldn't just focus on the men, but if the U.S. men's national team doesn't qualify, that the game's going to be okay, that people are still going to be interested. They're still going to follow the sport. And so, yeah, I just felt the timing was right, and we'll see what happens going forward.
I'm in agreement with you on that front. I think that the game has evolved to a point now where, you know, obviously it'd be fantastic if the men's national team was involved in World Cups or whatever, but the sport isn't solely dependent on kind of those things. So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to kind of frame it in this way. Is there anything different about valuing soccer memorabilia versus other sports? Is it the same process? I know you said people don't necessarily specialize in it, but are there any challenges? Are there any like advantages or differences between soccer and valuing other pieces of memorabilia?
It's essentially the same thing. It's a good question. It's essentially the same thing. I would just say, though, that soccer is bigger than anything else. And it's obvious it's the world's game. There are more leagues and more teams and more competitions. I was on another radio program, and I was trying to explain, it was a general appraisal radio program, and I was trying to explain soccer shirts, like soccer memorabilia, in like 10 minutes. I had to explain the game first. I had to explain all the teams and the setup. And it was like, I was tripping over my words. There's just too much. I mean, it was like, I had to explain that there's the Champions League, and then there's the domestic leagues, and then I got the cup competitions. I mean, my head was spinning because there's just too much. You don't have that with American sports necessarily. You don't have the variation of shirts that you have with soccer, in soccer, that you have in American sports. You don't have that. You know, American sports, maybe like, for instance, I'll give you an example, like the Boston Celtics. I mean, their shirt up until recently, their shirt was that they had two shirts. They had a home and away shirt, and that was it up until the 1990s or until recently. Now I look at the Celtics and it's like they got a different shirt on each time I see them. There's a gray shirt. There's they were wearing a pink shirt for what? I mean, it was, I think they'd gotten wise to, you know, the whole business model about soccer, about having all these different shirts. So, so the process is the same in terms of valuation, in terms of looking at comparable sales. If anything, I think it might be easier as an appraiser for me to go and look at, in some ways, comparable sales because there's so much out there. But it also makes it more challenging because there is so much more out there as well. And you have a lot of fakes that are out there. You don't necessarily have fake American sports shirts. You don't have fake Chicago Bulls shirts or fake Yankee shirts. Not really, but you have fake soccer shirts. You have fake football shirts being produced in Far East, you know, in Asia, in some places in Africa. And I'll give you an example real quick, not to go too far off track here, but last year in the World Cup in 2018, Nigeria, Nike released the Nigeria shirt before the World Cup. The shirt sold out in minutes. They didn't make enough. Now, some people are thinking that Nike did that on purpose because they want to drive, you know, interest and generate buzz. So they re-released the shirts, but it's created a huge buzz that everybody wanted the Nigeria shirt. So some really savvy entrepreneurs decided that they wanted to create some fakes. So they went out there and they created thousands of fakes. The makers of these shirts were in Asia and some places in Africa, and they started selling them for $20, $30 a pop. But they made so many of them. So how do you tell if something is a fake? Well, you look at, you know, you compare it with the original, just like you do with anything else. You look at a real shirt and you compare it with the fake. So, you know, I'm giving you a long-winded answer about it, but basically it's because the game is so much bigger. The process is the same, but it's more challenging in some ways to value soccer memorabilia.
No, I love that. And that leads into a couple of Twitter questions we had from user @SoccerSwap. So on the fakes front, have you ever had like an obvious fake piece of memorabilia that you've looked at with like some sort of funny story attached to it that you're able to share?
I have the good news, and I think it's good news or bad. It's good news is that I have never personally come across a fake. Now I know they're out there, and some people are like, "Yeah, the fakes really exist." Well, they do, and I've you know, there's fake everything that's out there, and it depends on where it's being produced. In this country, it's sort of hard to come across because we have very strict laws about these things, and which is a good thing. And our collectors, people here are more savvy about what they're collecting, and it's different if you're in a different corner of the world where, you know, they might not care about whether it's a fake or not. They just want something that looks good and it's fashionable. So someone's going to stitch it together. And look, if you don't want to spend $80 on a shirt, but you can spend 25, there's a market there for a potential for a fake. So no, I don't have any interesting stories other than the Nigeria one that I think a lot of people have because it was in the news. Signatures, fake signatures are a bit more of an issue, people forging signatures. And I have come across a couple signatures that were suspect. And I am not a signature authenticator, so I'm not really at liberty to say if it's real or fake. Somebody like a James Spence or a PSA DNA, they do authentication of signatures, but you can tell if something looks like it was traced, if it's got a shaky hand to it. So fake signatures, I think, are more of an issue than fake shirts at this point. But fake signatures or fake shirts, they are an issue in certain parts of the world.
Gotcha. And all that makes sense. Next question's from @SoccerSwap. So he said, what's the most expensive item you've ever appraised, if you can disclose?
I don't really like disclosing what I appraise, but I can tell you what's sold at auction, what the most expensive things are, soccer related, if that would be okay.
I think that's interesting as well. Yeah.
So look at one of the most expensive pieces of memorabilia that springs to my mind is the FA Cup trophy from 1896 that sold at Christie's and that sold for just about a little over $1 million. And now we think of soccer memorabilia, that's something that's incredibly rare, and it's something that's that you're not going to really come across too often. Trophies are the clubs will keep them, players will keep medallions, but when they get out there, they will surpass just about anything else that's out there, because you're dealing with, a lot of times you're dealing with precious metal, you're dealing with gold, sterling silver. They display very well. If you think about some of the other items, they're harder to display. If you have a match-worn boot, it's kind of hard unless you have a display case. There have been other items, match-worn shirts that have sold for, trying to think back to the 1986 Pele's match-worn shirt from the 86 quarterfinal win against England. I think that was up for sale for a few years ago for a few $100,000, $250,000, but I think they pulled it because they wanted to get more.
Maradona shirt?
I'm sorry, I should specify. Okay, yeah, the Maradona shirt. But you know, it's in terms of the prices that are realized, I think we're sort of at the point now where everyone's kind of waiting for what the next big thing is going to be, because we haven't had a big sale in a while. They had, I'm trying to remember, there was a sale a few years back. It was for not necessarily the FA Cup, but there was a Jeff Hurst shirt. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Hurst, English player from the 1966 World Cup. His shirt, his match-worn shirt from the final with Germany, their minimum bid that they placed on that, and I think that was at Sotheby's in 2016, was £300,000, and they didn't reach it. I think it got up to like maybe 250 or 275, but they didn't sell it. So in some cases, these things you could say that maybe they're overvalued. Maybe if the market is not going to bring that, and you haven't seen anything like that, but you're realizing hundreds of thousands, that's kind of the ceiling. I don't think we've gotten to Babe Ruth level stuff yet. But I think it's only a matter of time before we do.
Very interesting stuff. So my next question, and again, it doesn't have to be personal, but what's maybe the most unique collection you've ever heard of? So speaking personally, I collect soccer scarves and whatnot. Given your experience in this industry, you know, I'd just be curious to know if anything super unique sort of came to mind across a collection. So not just a piece of item. I don't know if somebody specializes in only collecting, you know, a piece of merch or only stuff from this time period or this country or anything like that. Can you disclose, you know, anything like that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I've seen turf from the old Wembley Stadium that was vacuum sealed in plastic. I've seen more recently. There was turf from White Hart Lane that was vacuum sealed in Tottenham pendants, the cockerel pendant, and they were selling that online for like $15. You know, the oddities don't necessarily bring as much as the as the other items do, for obvious reasons, because they're odd and nobody wants to collect some of these things. But seat backs can bring a few $100s. The Wembley seat backs, when they tore down the old Wembley Stadium in England, a few $100s on eBay. You can find them. All the graffiti on them, you know, and stuff, you know, you wanker this or whatever they wrote on it. Yeah, so there's always oddities. There's some auction houses that deal specifically with things that are very odd, like Julian's. They claim to have sold William Shatner's kidney stone after he had surgery or something, which is, I don't know how you display that item. Alex Ferguson's gum from his last match in charge, somebody was selling that on social media. I don't know how you have a COA for that. Do you have to have Alex Ferguson next to the gum, a picture of him chewing the gum and spitting it out into the thing? I don't know what you do DNA samples for that to see if it's the, you know. So there's a lot of weird stuff that's out there. And you know, it doesn't bring much, and how do you prove it? But it's pretty cool to talk about.
Yeah, it's got a fantastic story. So yeah, that was awesome. I'm glad I asked the question. And yeah, people can be odd, and it always makes for a funny story. Last couple questions for you, and this is kind of how we got connected. But you're writing a book about people that collect soccer memorabilia. What are your goals for writing the book?
Good question. Really, what I want to do is show where the hobby and where the industry sort of is at now. and where it's going. There are a lot of books out there about collectible soccer memorabilia over in Europe, but they're very specific. You have, football shirts, you have, books about boots and things like this, but not just one general overview about soccer memorabilia. And I don't want to just talk about what these items are and what they look like and have a catalog book. I want to go into, why are the prices the way they are? Are they fluctuating? Are they going up and down? I don't want to give too much away, but I really want to give someone an insight that they can pick up this book and they can read it and say, that sounds like a good idea. I really don't want to get involved with that. That sounds a little too risky. I was thinking about it. I want it to be helpful for people. And I also want it to have value in there. So if you're an appraiser and you're starting out, maybe you're a sports memorabilia appraiser, you're not sure how to value this stuff, you take a look at this book and it can answer questions for you as an appraiser. How would I value this stuff for insurance or anything else? I mean, as I mentioned, there's, similarities with how you value other types of memorabilia, but there's some differences as well, and things you should look out for. My big question in doing a lot of this is the sales chain for a lot of these items. What happens to your shirt? Like, I used to have a ton of shirts. I got rid of them. I used to, in the 90s, my parents would go to Europe, or I would go to Europe, family in Europe, and we get shirts from different Germany and England, and wear these shirts, and these were great shirts. I had like the 93 Manchester United shirt, 95 Blackburn, all these shirts, and they were cheap and it was great. $40 you could buy a shirt, but somebody has that shirt now. I think I gave it away to somebody because that shirt has, a sales chain, all these old shirts. So they're sold, somebody buys it, somebody gives it away to a thrift store. Maybe it ends up on eBay. A dealer picks it up on eBay for $30. They sell it for $150 and they sell it. Now somebody else has it and they bought it for $150. So I'm talking specifically about shirts. But that's sort of what, I kind of want to go into that and explain to people, this is what it's about. This is what you should look out for. And then if you want to sell it, what do you need to do to sell it to make sure it sells?
Yeah, and that's really cool to hear. So then how do you have a goal of like how many people you want to talk to for the book? Do you have a goal of I want to talk to a collector of, from this place, from that place, a collector of shirts, a collector of boots, a collector of scarves and whatnot? Do you have any goals like that, or is it more broad? You just want to talk to just collectors and try to get just a broad picture?
I want to talk to everybody. If you're involved in the game and you're collecting anything, I would love to talk to you. I've talked to a lot of people already. I've reached out to just about everyone here, and I've spoken to a lot of people in Europe. There are a lot of companies now that are reissuing shirts, and we didn't really touch on reissues. Reissue is a style of shirt that was very popular, and the manufacturer decides to reissue that shirt. It's a new shirt, but it's in the style of the old shirt. So Adidas did that this past year with the Columbia shirt. The 1990 Columbia shirt was very popular. Now, the reason they did that was because their new shirt, the new Columbia shirt, was kind of a throwback to that shirt. So they wanted to see if they could get a 2-for-1 deal. But the shirt sold out, and it was very popular because people want retro stuff now. There's some other brands, to drop a couple other names here. There's a brand called Toffs, Toffs, Toffs.com, and they reissue old shirts, the style of old shirts. Copa is another one based out of the Netherlands, and they have a licensing agreement, so they're able to produce all these old shirts, but new, and they're more fashionable. You can wear them. Sometimes they're made out of better material. So the interest is there, and I've spoken to a lot of people. But if anyone listening has any ideas or any suggestions or wants to talk to me, or they have any memorabilia that they want appraised, certainly contact me, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have all of Touchline Appraisals, contact, social media, and all of that linked in the video description. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to Jonathan. Jonathan, last book question for you. When are you expecting to finish and kind of release it?
We're looking at the end of September 2019. So not too much more to go, kind of the green mile right now. So we're looking forward to getting it out there. And I think it has a home. I think there's a lot of people that they don't want something so specific. They want something that's a little bit more general. that they can kind of ease into. I have a lot of stories in there, interesting stories of traveling to Europe. As I'm sure you probably have some interesting stories as well. Not being able to get into the game because the gates were closed and trying to figure out a way to sneak in and things like that. And stories. It's amazing how you can strike up a conversation with somebody that you don't know about when you talk about football or sport. And being in cab, sitting in a cab in New York City and noticing that someone has an Ivory Coast flag on their cab and saying, "What do you think about Drogba? What do you think about what he's doing right now?" "Oh, let me tell you." And then you're like, "Okay, you missed my stop. You were supposed to drop me off at the airport or somewhere else." And I got carried away. So, I mean, there's all these great, interesting stories, and hopefully I've been able to document some of them and include it in the book from a collecting perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. We'll be sharing it on social media and anywhere we can when that time comes. So everybody make sure to, follow Touchline Appraisals, keep track of the book, and definitely reach out with any suggestions, or if you're collecting anything for soccer, make sure to reach out. Jonathan, is there anything I didn't ask and that we didn't get to before I ask my final question?
Well, I've been rambling on so much, Dave, that I think I lost all my breath here. But yeah, I mean, the game is growing. It's not going to be something. It's not going to be a get rich quick thing. Some people come into the game thinking, okay, I'm going to make a ton of money off of this, and it doesn't work that way. You gotta do it because you like it. If you're thinking about collecting, collect because you like it. Collect because you like the shirt. There's some history behind it. Collect quality. Don't collect cheap souvenir style things, unless like I just wrote about pennants. Someone was asking me about pennants, right? So every time two teams would meet, each team would bring a pennant, and you would exchange the pennant before the game. And it happens, but it doesn't seem to happen as much anymore. Maybe I'm just not noticing it, but that was a big deal. And so you used to go to a clubhouse and you'd see all these pennants of all the teams that they played. And now these aren't worth a heck of a lot of money, maybe $10 or $15. But some of the older ones, the real old ones, can be worth a lot. But if that's what you like, collect it. Don't worry about, okay, this isn't worth anything. I don't want to do this anymore. Keep it, collect it, and enjoy it. And that's what it's for. It's for you to enjoy it. And if you have something that's worth a little bit extra, then certainly take care of your memorabilia. Figure out how to take care of it and display it, and if you want to resell it. But be careful about that kind of stuff as well.
Great advice. So, Jonathan, last question I ask all my guests. We like to leave it on a positive note here. What's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world? You can take it any direction you want. You can from a fan, you can take it from a company perspective and projects you're working on. But what's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world?
I mean, I'm really looking forward to the 2026 World Cup coming to the States. I mean, I know if it's kind of like a holy grail for a lot of people, and you're putting too much on it. But for me, I think that would be wonderful. And I think if people can afford the tickets and everything, I remember '94. It was just awesome. I mean, it wasn't always on the news, but going to games that was my introduction. The fans, it's just everything about it. The games mean so much. I think if we could put together a good tournament in 2026, would be great. I'm excited about the women playing in the summer. I feel like, only in certain channels do we really hear about it, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to warmer weather, hopefully here in Pennsylvania. I don't know. You're out in California, right? So the weather must be pretty nice there, but here it's just the grass is starting to get green. I have a 5-year-old son. He's starting to get excited about the sport. He's starting to put down his Thomas trains and starting to pick up a soccer ball. So I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed. So there's a lot to be excited about, and in the game and out of the game. So yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. That is fantastic to hear. So thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a fascinating interview because of all the projects. So I really appreciate your time. Can you, tell people where to find you online? Again, everything is linked for people to click, but in case people just listen, can you tell people where to find you?
Sure. Website is touchlineappraisals.com. So it's Touchline Appraisals, all one word, .com.
All right, there you go. Everybody make sure to go check out that website. And again, don't hesitate to get in contact. Hope you everybody enjoyed it. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, listeners and viewers that have stopped by, thanks so much for being here. Blunted, thank you for being here. Hello from Denmark. Hope all is well with you. And Jonathan, thanks again. All right, see you, everybody.
Take care.